not holding up well under the pressure. Making strings and strings of excuses while straining to maintain a thin veneer over what has now become a sprawling mass of lies. He is clearly not fit to have influence over such an important conflict and over its resolution. He cannot and will not be an honest broker for peace in this context. His blatant lack of empathy and inability to reach beyond his blind racial prejudice furthers the us and them situation, thus perpetuating the false dichotomy that this is an Islam versus the Western world situation. He expressed an obvious disregard for protest and for protesters, saying that, and again I quote, most people are more sensible, and fobbing off bloggers and anti-war journalists as silly. However, there is one point upon which I agree with Mr. Blair, and that is his assertion that, and again I quote, you can never underestimate the people. We commend all good people of conscience who came out in the streets today to show this war criminal and apologist for collective punishment that he is not welcome here. Finally, most of you are aware that tentative talks between Palestinian and Israeli representatives have begun. We would hope, of course, that these talks would lead to a just and lasting peace. However, we are all well aware that Israel enters these talks and negotiations from a position of power. We believe that the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign is the only effective way for individuals and civil society internationally to isolate the state of Israel, and the best way to support our brothers and sisters fighting is the Israeli colonisation of Palestine. There is an argument that runs something like, we cannot boycott one side in the conflict. We need to represent both sides and encourage them to resolve their issues through dialogue. This, however, assumes two things. One, it assumes that there are two equal sides in this, when in fact there is a coloniser with one of the biggest military forces in the world and a colonised and oppressed Palestinian people. Two, it assumes that Israel negotiates in good faith, when in fact history has shown the opposite. All we have to do is look back at the last 18 years since Oslo and the fact that settlement construction has doubled in a clear violation of the terms of that agreement. There must be some degree of parity between negotiating parties if talks are to succeed. The IPSC believes that the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement is the only way that we can help to achieve this parity. BDS enables us to pressure the Israeli state and show that its actions have repercussions internationally, and that it is no longer acceptable for it to act as it does. On this basis, we believe that boycott, divestment and sanctions can have only a positive role in laying the groundwork for future negotiations on a more level playing field. We encourage you all to join the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement and to heed the call for it from Palestinian civil society. This places the power for change back into the hands of the people and supersedes the power of power-hungry warmongers like that slimeball who's going to be in Easons very shortly. If negotiations have taught us anything, it is that there is a time to stand your ground and there is a time to walk away. Now is clearly the time for Tony Blair to walk away and allow genuine voices of solidarity to be heard. Some of those voices are attempting to break the siege of Gaza again at the end of October, when the second International Freedom Flotilla will sail towards Gaza. A number of independent Irish pro-Palestinian groups have come together to try and raise money and raise the possibilities of getting an Irish vote on this. We encourage you all to get involved, to help us to fundraise, to donate and to raise awareness of this situation. Lastly, I would just like to stress that we in the IPSC demand an end to the siege of Gaza. We demand an end to the occupation of Palestine and Israel's apartheid regime. And we demand an end to the Zionist oppression of the Palestinian people. Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Thanks very much, Frida. And it is disappointing that those who are going in to see Mr. Blair should cheer when the microphone at this end goes out, which is trying to give voice to the people of Palestine as they suffer under Israeli rule, and while Tony Blair fails as EU Middle East envoy to do anything but support them. Surely Surely the people going in to see Mr. Blair and get those books signed believe the Palestinians should at least have as much voice as Mr. Blair. Do you not believe that? Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free!
And those members of the Garda who are here today, who are carrying out their orders, as they're bound to do, should remember that their role, and we should remember that their role in this state is to protect the state, not to protect the people. And they will always, as they have done since the inception and the creation of this state, done so. They have, in every generation, north and south of this border, beaten people off the streets for protesting for civil and human rights. And we are here today demanding that most basic civil and human right of people across the world, whether it's in Iraq, Afghanistan, and as Tony Blair said last night, next in Iran, that basic human right of the right to life. We have listened to establishment politicians in this state for 30 or 40 years say that they were opposed to terrorism, say that they were opposed to violence. Where are they today? Where are the members of the Labour Party and those other parties who claim that they support ordinary people, that they're opposed to war? Where are the members of Sinn Féin, for instance, who sit in government implementing Blair's and Brown's rule in the north? But let us be quite clear that the establishment across the world are inducing and continuing to induce ordinary working class people to join their imperialistic armies to fight wars for resources, for oil, for water and for power. Nothing has changed in this world since the First World War, when ordinary working class people were the cannon fodder for imperialistic powers. But remember, for evil to succeed, all that it requires is for good men to say nothing. While Tony Blair wanders the streets with Garda protection, with MI5 operatives walking these streets armed and taking names from people queuing up to get his book signed. While Sean Fitzpatrick and those who have brought this country to its knees are wined and dined and sail off with our multi-million pound pensions, while people like Alan Dukes, who claim to be public interest directors, receive $250,000 salaries and huge pensions for being failed ministers of finance in this country, continue to reap the benefits that we must pay for. They are prepared to jail Sean Garland, and I would ask the people here to take part in that campaign to stop the extradition of Sean Garland, because that is part of this imperialistic war and power struggle that is being waged. And this is quite a simple matter. All of these issues, there is a right and there is a wrong. And we are right. War criminals like Blair and Bush are wrong. It is no longer acceptable that people like them parade around Europe as peacemakers. They come to this country and say that they're great peacemakers. In fact, they're war criminals, they are murderers. And the government in this country is just as culpable of involvement in that war through its use and the allowance by this state of Shannon to bring American troops into those war zones. And the Green Party particularly, who stood with us before they went into government, who stood and said that they were opposed to rendition flights, that they were opposed to the use of Shannon, are now the foremost advocates of using those of Shannon to transport British or American troops and munitions to war zones to kill innocent people. Thank you, comrades.
There's the fans. Can't wait to meet Tony. those guys are the real heroes of the day. They know what's going on.
They've checked it out. 9/11 was an inside job. The London bombings were. Just check it out for yourselves. This is investigators on the day. On the day, the people who were bombed on the London bombings, the trains on the London bombings, there was training that was happening throughout all the emergency services. Yeah. There was training that was happening on that day. All the emergency services on that day were being trained. The scientists have told us that the chances of that happening on this very same day the bombings happened is 0.00001%.
The exact same drill.
The exact same drill. This is evidence, that's September 11th. What happened on the day? Investigators talking. The people who investigated. Sorry?
Have you spare one?
Yeah, sure.
Good man, thanks.
People who investigated 9/11, the people who were there on 9/11, they're talking about this. Tony Blair wasn't there. Tony Blair doesn't have a clue. Tony Blair is just a puppet of the system. Folks, you have to understand, they have done this before, time and time again. There's documented archives that have been released about this information. They've released this information. They've done it before plenty of times. In Russia, the Russians blew up their own building so they can go into a war in Chechnya. Hitler did it. He blew up his own Reichstag. This is historical evidence. He blew up his own Reichstag so he can go into a war with Poland. They've done it loads of times. They've done it in 9/11. They've done it with
Vietnam.
many wars. Vietnam as well.
World War I.
The U-boats that were attacked. This is all released from their archives. This isn't my information. This is their archives releasing this. Yeah. Folks, check it out. Have a look, sir.
What about the young girl on the cover of Time magazine 2 weeks ago?
Yes, what about her?
But that was her husband. And the
No,
Taliban.
that was at the direction of the Taliban court, right?
What Taliban? I thought the Taliban were rooted out.
No, they still control large sections of Afghanistan.
Right. What about the Taliban?
No, I'll tell you, that one picture says it all to me. A girl with her nose disfigured for life. Now take the stupid grin off her face. That was a horrific, absolutely hideous atrocity.
Well, can I ask you something, sir? Can I ask you something? Who put the Taliban in power in the first place? Who armed the Taliban? Who put their leader in power in the first place? Who trained their leader?
The point about it is, I am here for the rights of that girl and people like that girl.
Well, man, if you're here for their rights, the boss of the Al-Qaeda, the boss of Al-Qaeda and the boss of the Taliban is sitting over there. That's their boss.
Rubbish.
Saddam Hussein was put in power by the Americans. Who armed him and who put him in
Don't get
power?
yourself excited. If Hitler wrote a book, the same crowd will be here queuing to get it.
Oh, yeah.
Honest to God, the very same
Folks,
crowd.
don't believe. Don't believe.
Don't upset yourself now.
No, that's no problem. I'm just handing out DVDs. If you want to take them, folks. It's not a problem. Folks, free DVDs, folks. 9/11, London bombings. What happened? Free DVDs. Madrid bombings, folks. London bombings. 9/11. This is documented evidence from the people who investigated 9/11, from the people who investigated the London bombings. MI5, the ex-MI5 agents who left MI5 are giving descriptions of exactly what happened on that day. The chances of that happening, a sheer coincidence of that happening, where all the emergency services were occupied.
I don't want to hear you. I expect you have your opinion. That's fine. I have mine. I don't want to be. I don't want you to be.
I'm talking to everybody.
Well, will you do it a bit further?
Okay, no problem. No problem. Folks, just check out the DVDs. There's no harm. Check out the other side of the story. 9/11 inside job, London bombings, Madrid. The same people that are doing these attacks, they're the people that are doing all of this. They're the same people that are behind the media. They're in power. They're the ones that are controlling the way we form our opinions. Folks, 9/11 was the trigger that set off Afghanistan and Iraq. Look what the investigators who investigated 9/11, look at them. Look what they said. Not what Tony Blair said. Look what the people on the ground said. Look what they said.
The 9/11 Commission, they all said it was set up to fail, didn't they?
They all said this already. Folks,
5
I
of
don't
the
wanna
10
talk too much.
commissioners.
I just want to give you some DVDs. If you want to look at them, look at them. If you don't, but at least just give it a chance. This is the other side of the story. What's Tony Blair going to tell you that you don't already know? He's going to apologize and he's going